Hello, I'm Peter Freeth, and I've been asked a few times recently to explain in a little bit more detail the principles behind the idea of non-contextual questioning as a coaching intervention, better known as the Unsticker. How would you describe this? You probably said it's a blue square, and it would be probably quite difficult for me to convince you that it's anything else. So let me ask you a question. How round is this object? How do you answer that question? Let's take a closer look. If we zoom in and look very closely at the corners, they don't seem quite so square, do they? You can try this at home, maybe with a picture frame or a piece of furniture. Just feel the corners of it. They're not razor sharp. Are you starting to consider that this object appears square at first, but the more you think about it, the more you realise it's not absolutely square? And the key to this is in the way that we make comparisons. When we compare two sensory perceptions, we hold one as a point of reference, and we then notice similarities or differences to that reference. Compare these two characters, for example, and notice how your eyes move from one to the other, and notice how you try to hold one in memory while projecting it onto the other. In fact, we make comparisons over time because the perception that we hold in memory is implicitly in the past, and because it's in the past, it's subject to distortion. Now, even though you only saw those characters a few seconds ago, if I asked you to choose which one of these was the character on the right, could you work it out? It was this one. Are you still with me? You're wondering how this relates to non-contextual or creative problem solving, aren't you? Imagine that you have an experience. Some kind of event takes place, a collection of sensory perceptions, and those perceptions form your memory of the event. You attach an emotion to those perceptions, and then you make a judgment on that whole package. Your judgment might be that the event was difficult or challenging or joyous or fun. Your judgment might be that the event was a problem. And what you then do is you project that problem forwards into the future in order to try to predict and control events which are inherently unpredictable and uncontrollable. Your assumed reason for your frustration and lack of progress becomes a problem. Yet the problem is simply a collection of perceptions, representations of reality. And those perceptions, and therefore the problem, don't exist without you or outside of you. Those representations are no more real or accurate than any other. And as soon as you ask questions about the problem, which are contextually relevant, have you tried this? That won't work. Have you tried that? That won't work. I've tried everything. Nothing works. You implicitly agree that the problem exists. Oh yes. Oh, how awful for you. How sad. I agree it's a big problem. So let's ask questions which don't presuppose the problem exists. What's over here? What's the date on Monday? Do you think aliens exist? Have you seen my car keys? Okay, maybe that's a bit too random. Let's try something else. What's over here? Have you noticed all this white space? How round is this shape? How purple does this colour look? As soon as we ask a question which is contextually relevant, our thoughts become constrained by the rules and the boundaries of the problem. But as soon as we ask a question which is non-contextually relevant, our thoughts are freed from the rules and boundaries of the problem. However, because the problem is the subject of the conversation, the client understands that to be the context for your question, even though the question itself makes no sense. So, for example, if the problem was a cocoon, what would hatch from it? A moth or a butterfly? The only way to process the grammar of the question is to re-evaluate the definition of the problem. When you ask contextually relevant questions, the problem is the fixed reference point, and your questions are distorted to fit the problem, and since the problem can't be solved, your questions will be ineffective. But when you ask non-contextually relevant questions, the question becomes the fixed reference point, and that problem is distorted to fit the question, and that distortion changes the representation of the problem. The original perceptions still exist, yet they're now arranged in a different way, telling a different story. That new story enables action, and action leads to change. The non-contextual aspect of the unsticker is the most important part of how it works, because that's the carrier for the content of the question. Once the client has to expand or reinterpret the problem in order to answer the question, things get a lot easier, but we still need some help to shake the problem loose. The content of the unsticker's questions add an extra dimension, because each question is a linguistic form of an NLP technique. If you look at the structure of the questions, you'll see reframes, swishes, submodality changes, perceptual positions, dissociations, parts integrations, and much more. The unsticker works by first neutralizing the emotional attachment to the problem, then distorting the structure of the problem until the representation can no longer be called a problem. The objective events have not changed, only their meaning has changed. Yet it was their meaning which turned them into a problem, a barrier to the client's desired outcome. So fundamentally, the unsticker works by taking the existing representations and using them to tell a new story. That new story enables action, and action leads to change. So now you know how it's made.